been an active member of the Search for God study groups for 25 years in Memphis, Tennessee. I read recently her article about her history in the study group program, and I found it so inspiring. And it helped me to feel like I know you better and what brings you to this work. So thank you for sharing that beautiful article. She's also been a field volunteer, serving in the Mid-South Area Team Coordinator in the early 1990s, and then again in 2002 and 2013. She's a member of her local Glad Helpers Healing Prayer Group and the speakers team. And you know, we do have the Wednesday group here on the premises here at headquarters, but it's nice to know that there are Glad Helpers groups out in our regions as well. And she's in that group. She's been the Southeast Region Core Team since 2006, serving as study group coordinator for the region and for her local Mid-South area team. Since 2013, she's been focusing on mentoring new Search for God study groups throughout Tennessee, Mississippi, Kentucky, and Arkansas. An article about her mentoring adventures appears in this recent Venture Inward, and that's the one I'm mentioning. So give yourself an opportunity to read it. If you don't happen to be receiving a Venture Inward at this time, we have some available out at the desk, so please ask for it. Lora is a longtime student of the Cayce readings and has a special interest in the readings related not only to spiritual development, but also to archaeology. This interest has led her to travel extensively to ancient sites throughout North and Central America, as well as to be a part of the A.R.E Atlantis Research Team, working in the Bahamas with Greg Little, who she seems to be related to. She's a co-author of 6 books, including The Lost Hall of Records with John Van Auken, The A.R.E Search for Atlantis with Greg Little, Mound Builders, Ancient South America, Secrets of the Ancient World, and Edgar Cayce's Atlantis, all with Greg Little and John Van Auken. Lora and Greg were co-writers and editors of the A.R.E Ancient Mysteries newsletter, beginning with the very first issue in 2001 until 2004, and for many years were frequent speakers at A.R.E's Ancient Mysteries conferences. Lora has had careers both as a psychological counselor and as a healthcare administrator in a large urban public health department. She is a qualified fellow in the Bonney method of music-centered psychotherapy, and for many years was a music volunteer for Memphis Hospice. She is here at Congress this year with a group of 20 other A.R.E and Search for God study group volunteers from Tennessee, North Carolina, Kentucky, and Mississippi, staying together as a group in 3 beach houses. So these are the party houses this year, and I was invited last night, but when you get ready to get down, she'll let you know where they are. If you could please turn off your cell phones and any devices you have for us to now attune ourselves and get ready to hear Dr. Lora Little.
Okay. Am I on, Kevin? I'm on. Okay. Can you hear me now, as we say? Good evening. Thank you guys for coming back from supper. I know you've had a long day. There have been lots of wonderful programs today and lots to do. I hope you're enjoying yourself so far. What I'm going to do is a little different tonight from what you've been hearing, but I hope it's going to allow you to get just a little bit more excited about what's going on in the field and what can go on in the field. Let's see. I've been told this is really easy to use. We'll see. If I can use it, it's got to be really easy. Okay, creating Cayce community in your community is what we're going to talk about today. It's something that I've been doing in between trips to the Bahamas. I'm going to start with your story. Where are you guys? Because I know I'm not just talking to people who have no idea what's going on in the field. In fact, as I look at a lot of faces here, I know there's a lot more experience in the field than I've had. Some of you have been at it for 40 some odd years. It's on your shoulder to be that I'm doing. People standing, hopefully, on my shoulders and what I leave behind so that we'll have a really, really energetic field program out there. So I want to hear a little bit about you first. Then I'm going to tell you my story. I really was fighting between two titles, so I made it a title and a subtitle. Because truly, we in Memphis, we had it really were many, many years volunteer support. And at the time that I was given the reins, that's the word. Yeah, I was going to say the steering wheel. Suddenly I looked back and I was the only one in the car, almost. However, that didn't last too long. So, and I knew we were in trouble because I always considered myself the worst A.R.E recruiter in the world. I thought, uh-oh, we're in big trouble. So I'm going to tell you my story, and I'm going to, if I can do this, if I can be involved with this, I didn't do this, but if I can be involved with helping grow a program back, anybody can do it. And the good thing is we have help, and that's what I'm going to tell you about. Okay, then I'm going to give you a few recommendations from the readings. And then at the end, we're going to see if maybe some of you might want to sign up for a little more information about being an A.R.E community builder. Doesn't mean you have to volunteer. You just might want to know a little bit more about it. All right, so the first thing is, where are we? You know, the Cayce readings tell us over and over again that we begin where we are. We start where we are. You know, we know where we'd like things to be, but you have to face the reality of wherever things are in this particular moment. So I thought we'd do just a little bit of an assessment. And I'll have to say, great minds think alike. Last night, Kevin got you all to stand up who are members and who's in study group, and I thought, dadgum, that's exactly what I was going to do. Except I have a couple of little changes to mine, but I'm still going to do it because I think it's important. So I want to ask you to stand up if you are a member of A.R.E. In the room? Okay, very good. Stay standing if you are also in a study group. Or have ever been in a study group. It's okay if you've ever been. All right. I hear that. Okay. Continue standing if you have been an A.R.E field volunteer, or currently are or have been. Don't have to be current. Okay. All right.
What's a field volunteer?
A field volunteer starts study groups, hosts a study group, is a person who also might do things for a program in their area. You know, they may be the bookseller, they may be the check-in person, they may do the refreshments. Just some activity that they do in their area, that when there's some sort of a program going on. Maybe you're the person that shows a movie once a month or has the potluck at your house, but something that's a little above and beyond just being a member of a Search for God group, although that's a wonderful thing to do. Okay, lots of people still standing. This is awesome. Okay, so how many of you have an area team in your area? Remain standing if you have an area team in your general vicinity. Oh, I love this. Most people have been able to continue standing. That's good. We just got a few that had to sit down. Some of you may not know you have an area team in your area. Yeah. So let's make a note here that we need to make sure people know they have an area team in their area. All right. Now for the really tough question here is, how many of you have started a study group in the last 5 years? Started a new study group in the last 5 years? Or helped, if you were helping. Okay, more people standing than I would have thought. All right, I recognize some of you from Memphis who have been our helpers. Woo. All right, and Florida and Birmingham. Martha Loveland, in addition to being a board member and a regional coordinator, has also this year been working to start a new group in Birmingham. I mean, that's above and beyond. And so tell us where you're from.
Florida. My brother got me to start one in Ocala.
All right. Way to go, way to go. Okay. And Denver, all right, yay, Denver. Well, that's the way of it, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that.
And we're working on one in the next few months in Palm
Yay, Palm Beach. All right, go.
Charlottesville.
Charlottesville, Virginia. Yeah, Charlottesville's a really active area. Good job, good job. Let's see who else I don't know. Back there, yeah. And Alyssa, yes.
We have 2 groups in the last.
Yay. Way to go, Alyssa. Alyssa, y'all started your group about 3 years ago, and it got so big you had to break up into 2 groups, and you could probably even do 3 groups from the numbers I've been hearing. Yeah, yeah, excellent, excellent. And then behind her, Phoenix, Arizona. Go Phoenix! All right, very good. And here?
We're getting off the ground, Little Rock.
Oh!
We came over a couple of times and I was gone.
Okay. Are you Larry? Larry? Okay, wonderful. Yay, Little Rock. Okay, and Myrna.
Well,
So,
greater Chicago area and also in Wisconsin.
all right, awesome. And the lady in pink behind Margaretha. All right, Canada. Way to go. All right. So did I get to everybody other than the people I know over here?
How about the Chesapeake Bay?
All right, Chesapeake Bay. You started a new study group. All right, way to go, way to go. Good job. And I have to say, that's more people than I thought would stand. I knew I'd see Margaretha standing up here and Martha standing up here, but there's a whole lot more of you that I had a feeling you were out there. I just didn't know where you were. And the reason I know you're out there is there's a spirit moving. And I don't know if some of you felt it. There's something happening that's not in the seen world, it's in the unseen world. And it's bringing some of us, it's helping some of us to take the steps we need to take to move this work forward. And I thought it might be interesting to look at something Edgar Cayce had to say about cycles. I don't know if you guys have seen this reading. I'm sure Kevin has because it's in the vibrations material. But he talks about, he says, all vibration must eventually, as it materializes into matter, which is us, as well as everything, pass through a stage of evolution and out. For it rises in its emanation and it descends also. Hence the cycle or circle or arc that is the description of all influence in the experience of man. Very few do they come in angles. So in other words, things go up and they come down, and they go up and they come down. Things wax and they wane. So, you know, the last question I was going to ask you guys was, how many of you have been in an area for a while where you've seen a decline in the number of study groups or the amount of activity in your area? Yeah, not surprising. Okay, and how many of you are now experiencing a rise in activity? All right, it's coming back up. So it's like a wave. Here's where the tsunami is beginning to flow through, and it's going to come through the whole group. I truly believe that. All right. And this story is partly for Kevin. As you know, he's a great fan of Disney. And there's a wonderful movie that has been showing for the last couple of months called Tomorrowland. Have any of you seen it? Okay. Did you recognize what it was talking about? Mind is the builder. They never use those words. And I highly recommend it to you because it's about creating our own future and about hope and about if we believe something, if we set the intention, as the Cayce readings tell us, if we believe something enough and we take steps to work in that direction, we can change the future. And it shows that if we give up, we also create the future. If we do nothing, we create the future. It inspired me so much. I had a phone call with Martha right afterwards, and I was all like this, and she was all like this about a project she was doing, and we were both so pumped up because it's really how we feel about this work right now.
Tell us the title again.
Tomorrowland. If you know very much about Disney World, there's a place in Disney World that's called Tomorrowland, and it's really kind of thorough and to upgrade it a little bit. That's what I. but it's really a whole lot more, and I don't want to give it away because it is inspiring, and somebody who was involved with it understands the concept that mind is the builder and that we have to create our future. So one of the stories in this movie is the story of the two wolves, and it's a Cherokee story. It actually may come from some other traditions too. And how many of you know the story of the two wolves? Okay. So the Cherokee grandfather tells his grandson that there are two wolves, and then they're in battle. They're inside of us, and they're at battle at all times. And he says one is evil, and he describes it as anger, envy, jealousy, sorrow, regret, lots of other negative things. And the word that struck out to me was hopeless. So I put it in red. And I think in cartoons when we were growing up, most of us have seen where the little devil's on one side and the angel's on the other side. It's a little bit like that. The other is good. It's all about joy, peace, love, and hope, serenity, humility, kindness, all of the good things. And so the grandson thought for a minute about it, and then he asked his grandfather, well, if there's this battle going on, which wolf wins? Which wolf wins? So what do you all say? Which wolf wins? The one you feed. That's right. I got that from the movie Tomorrowland, and it really made it a feed wolf. You know, it's really easy to get to negative wolf. But you know how much better it feels when someone, usually the people around you, can help you to spiral back into the positive way of thinking, and what a difference that makes. And of course, this is Cayce also. So that's how I look at what's happening out in the field, and how I look at study groups. That if we decide that they're never going to get any better, that it's something that's going to go away, it will go away. If we decide that it's something that we think is so valuable that it needs to be promoted and brought forward and introduced to people and mentored along so that there are more new groups, then there will be more new groups. All right. So at this point, I'm going to stop and talk about myself. I'm going to tell my story. The first part of my story is going to be about things that relate to recruiting. How do we get people interested in this work? And I'm going to tell my story because it informs me of the things I may need to do to help to attract other people to this work. But as I'm telling my story, I want you to think about your story. Who was it that influenced you? How did you get involved in this work? And what were the different things that happened to you? And probably in most of the stories that you have for yourself, you'll find it was a multitude of things that influenced you. So for me, for example, I started out reading about paranormal things. I'm from a little town in Missouri, and I started reading about paranormal things in my little library in a town of 3,000. It didn't have very many books. I came to know that there were books in there because one day in my Catholic school, the boy in one of the other classes brought a book in, and he said, there's this woman named Jean Dixon. And she says that she predicted that John F. Kennedy would be assassinated. So this was like 1966, I guess. And of course, if you were Catholic in the 60s and John F. Kennedy was mentioned to a religious person, they would listen. So I'm sure that's why the nun said, well, okay, let's read the book. So she read the book to us before lunch every day. There was always like 10 or 15 minutes. We'd finished a class and she would read some book to us. So she took that book and she read the part about where she had predicted John F. Kennedy's assassination and how all that went down. And so here I am in 7th grade. I've got all these books on the bookshelf about mystics and saints that could levitate and had stigmata and all of these mystical things. We learned about Lourdes and Fatima and all of those. So here was this woman who could see the future, just like the prophets in the past. So it really wasn't that weird to us. And the nuns didn't seem to be too disturbed by it. And she read the book, never said a negative thing about it, gave the book back to the boy. And I thought, where did he get that book? I'm going to go see if there are any books like that in the library. This sounds interesting. So I found some books. None of them were Sleeping Prophet. None of them were There's a River, unfortunately, but I kept getting books that would mention Edgar Cayce. But I read everything I could find. And then I get into college, and I meet this guy named Greg Little. And when I met this guy named Greg Little, he knew all this weird stuff I'd been reading. He read about UFOs. He read about von Däniken. He read Ancient Astronauts and all of this same stuff I had read. And I'd never met anybody else who'd read this stuff. In fact, I guess about 10 years ago, I went back to my library, and those books that I had read were still there. They still had the little card, and my name was still there. And there were no other names after my name, which was really kind of a shock, but anyway. So here I'd finally found somebody who understood the same things that I did. And he kept telling me, he said, you know, there's this book you would really like. He says, it's called There Is a River, about Edgar Cayce. And I said, yeah, well, I mean, you know, we're both in college. We had 50 million things to read. I don't do pleasure reading right now. There's no way I can find time to do it. Maybe eventually, just, you know, I'll get it from you. So we waited 5 years, like we got married. He's working nights, I'm working days. He, for some reason, one night, decided to pull that book off his bookshelf and just started reading it. So he was reading it to go to sleep, and I wanted something. And he was, you know, I'm so lazy I wasn't going to get my own book. I just saw he had it out, so I picked it up. And I started reading. I thought I'd just read about 15 minutes or so, right? And then I'd fall asleep. So come 1 a.m., I'm still reading, and I don't want to put the book down. It's the most fabulous thing I had ever read. It answered all the questions that I had at that point. I was really confused about, you know, what to believe and what was real, and it brought it all together for me. So I couldn't wait to get back from work the next day. I had to finally go to sleep, put the book down, came back home the next day, read the rest of the book immediately, just couldn't wait to get home so I could finish reading the book. About 2 weeks after that, we just moved into this house near the University of Memphis, and in the mail, well, I will say in the There Is a River book at the end, it tells you about an organization called A.R.E that has all of the Cayce readings and has conferences and so forth. And I thought, well, that sounds like a neat place. But, you know, I'm busy, I'm working, I got lots of things going on. Well, 2 weeks later, in my mailbox was one of those purple mimeograph sheets. Remember those days? From the local A.R.E group to the previous resident of our house. And I'm like, these people are in town, they're here. This can't, you know, and what are the chances that I wouldn't have known. If it had happened a couple of weeks before that, before I had read the book, I wouldn't have known what A.R.E was. I would have seen it was to the previous residents. I probably would have just thrown it in the trash and moved on. I probably wouldn't have taken time to look at it. But it was one of those Twilight Zone moments where you go, how did this happen and why did this happen now? So I saw that they were really busy. They had meetings, they had little get-togethers, they had speakers at different times, and they had a little schedule on there what they were doing. And I worked for the health department then. I was actually I probably worked at a different place, but either where I was working, I didn't talk to people about this weird stuff that I believed in. So I was really afraid to get involved with these people in town. They might be a little weird, you know. Like I wasn't, because I was already reading all this stuff. So Greg and I decided we would become members. And as soon as we could, we attended a conference at A.R.E. And so for about 7 years, we just attended conferences here, week-long conferences, twice a year. And we'd save up our money, and we'd always not come in the summer because it was so crowded. We'd come in the winter and when it was cold. And people at our jobs said, why are you going to Virginia Beach when it's so cold? You know, how can you lay out on the beach? And we'd say, well, we're not laying out on the beach. We're going to a library to read, or we're going to a conference. And they're just looking at us like, yeah, okay, whatever. Doesn't sound like a vacation to us. But when we got here, of course, we got exposed to these really wonderful teachers. This was the 1980s. And got to hear things that were just absolutely amazing to me, and also get to see people who were living the work. And I think that was a really important piece of it to me. I learned how to meditate from people here. But at every one of our conferences, you know, you'd end up at the end of that week just, you knew your aura was out to here, your halo was shiny, and you know, you just felt like you could handle the world, right? And you go home and you know you're going to go back to work and you're going to be just ready to go and nothing's going to throw you. You're going to think positive, mind is the builder. You had it all. You knew exactly how you were going to handle your day. 2 hours into my day on Monday morning when I'd go back in, I was back down on the floor again. My vibration was just totally wrecked. And, but each one of the conferences that I went to, they would tell me, there was always a speaker who would tell about study groups. They said, if you really want to do this work, if you really want to do the hard work on yourself to really make a change in yourself, you need to be in a weekly Search for God study group. And so most of the times when I came, they would also say you could find out who has study groups in your area by just filling out this form. So I would fill out the form and they'd send me back this long list. Memphis had 23, 25 groups at one time. And, you know, and I'd say, well, gosh, there's some really near me. Did I go? No. For 7 years, I would get those lists and I'd take them home and I'd have a good intention, and I didn't go. But I knew I wanted to. I could tell that it was, from the way people talked about it, that it was a really good thing. And I knew that these twice-a-year conferences were not changing me significantly where I could really apply all these things at my job. And as I said, 2 hours after I'd be there, after this wonderful week, I would be a completely different person, back to the person that I was. So finally, in 1990, because I was a member, I was on a list for the people still operating, the volunteers in Memphis, big volunteer group, and they had a speakers team. And so they had a conference on attitudes and emotions at one of the malls in town. In fact, one of the speakers is right back there, Diane Stanford. And I thought, attitudes and emotions, yeah, that's one I ought to do. And so I thought, okay, I'm gonna try these people out. I'm gonna go check them out. And so I went to the Hickory Ridge Mall, and they had this nice little room in the back, and they gave 2 or 3 of them, they split it up through the day, and they gave a really good overview of what is in some of the books that have been written about attitudes and emotions and what the Cayce readings had to say about it. But the most interesting thing was that when I came in, there was a lady who checked me in who looked on my information and she saw that I lived in Memphis, and then she made sure to walk over to me not long after, I guess, the first break, and she said, "Oh, have you ever thought about being in a study group?" I said, "Yeah, a bunch of times." I said, "I've gotten lists a whole bunch of times." She said, "Well, where do you live?" And I told her where I lived in town, and she said, "Oh, I have a group. I'm a host of a group just 10 minutes away from you." And I thought, well, I'm going to have to do it now. Here it is. But also, I got a chance to see some of the people who were going to be in the group. Some of the teachers were in the group. And I also was watching the people who were there to see if these were people that I wanted to hang out with, to be honest. And they were. People were friendly. They were kind. The speakers were genuine. It was just really felt like a good group. So the lady at the checkout was Eileen Auksher, that some of you know, has been a member of the board of trustees. And she was also smart in that she set up an inquiry meeting for the next week so that I wouldn't forget and get caught up in something else. So I went to her house the next week. She did this inquiry. I thought, this still sounds good. Then I went to my first meeting. And that's been 25 years ago, and haven't stopped since. So from that, I don't have the right slide up. You can see there are several things that happened to get me recruited. I heard about it in several ways, several different ways. I got to see people that I would be interacting with. There were programs locally, programs here. It's like this big system that all worked together. And it took me 7 years to finally make the decision to actually be in a study group. And I think sometimes, and I've been guilty of it, in a meeting, you pull someone aside and maybe they sign a sheet and you think, oh, they're going to come to our study group next week, and then something happens. Well, if you have patience, eventually they're going to come. They're going to find their way to you. So Okay, so fast forward then. So in 1990, I joined the study group. For 12 years, I got to be in the study group, still going to A.R.E headquarters workshops. And it was one fall afternoon in 2002, I went to my study group. Well, back in 1990, there were only 4 study groups left in Memphis. There had been 20, 25 groups in the 70s and 80s. They were down to 4 when I started in 1990. And gradually over the next 10 years, 3 of those fell by the wayside for lots of different reasons. And so I was in the final group in, let's see, this was 2002, and there were 5 of us in there. And when I walked into the group that night, the 2 people who hosted the group informed us that they were moving out of town and retiring. And it was like, whoa, okay, now what? What happens to study group? Well, they had a daughter and son-in-law who said they would have it in their home. So, okay, well, we'll be all right. There'll just be 4 of us, but okay, we can make it. And luckily, there had been a fellow from Ohio who'd moved down, and he joined us. And he'd been in study group a long time in Ohio. So we went to the daughter and son-in-law's house, and that lasted about 3 meetings. And they were just they'd just gotten married, they were blending their families. It was just too much for them to try to have a meeting. So after the 3rd meeting, they said, we're sorry, we just can't do this. So here was myself and the Ohio fellow looking for a study group. And I'm thinking, how did this happen? And I really got worried because during those 12 years I had been in the study group, the other study group, I had watched those other groups go down, and I thought to myself, I need to try to help recruit some people in. So I would give There's a River to friends. I would talk to people about Edgar Cayce and, and do what I thought was the best I could do to recruit people. Did I ever get anybody in a group? No, never. So here I was with just one other person. I thought, this doesn't look good because my track record has not been very good. But I thought, well, there was a point at which I thought, well, maybe we could get into a library. My home was way out in the boondocks in a bad part of town. Nobody was going to drive out there. He lived in an apartment. It was too small to have a group. And I was trying to find a place that maybe we could draw back in some former members or I had hope. I still had hope. Went to the library, went to a couple other places that I thought might be a good place to have a group, and just things weren't right. The doors just kept closing. Well, finally, I realized that I had an ace in the hole that I wasn't wanting to play. There was a fellow who had been in a group before who was always so generous with his home. He lived in a central part of Memphis, perfect setting. He had been in study group before, all that was great, but my experience of him was that he was a compulsive talker. I had only met him in social situation, never been in study group with him. And he was one of those people that when you went to the barbecues and all, that after a while you just kind of had to walk away. And I thought, gosh, that might not be good to attract people to the group, that might be a problem. But I really believe that the universe was pushing me to play that card because it ended up being the exact right card to play. He was the person, he was the place we needed to be. And so I finally, at that point, I thought, okay, my back's against the wall. Maybe I just don't need to do study group. Maybe I just need to go find a group somewhere else. And that's when I found my commitment to study group because I realized that I didn't want to not have a study group. I did not want to be in a situation. There was no other group that appealed to me. And I knew that in the 12 years I'd been in it, I'd learned more than I had in just reading the books, being involved in any other way, and I wanted that to continue. I knew I wasn't anywhere near ready to say I had it all. So this little part of me just kind of screamed inside, no, you can't not have a study group. So I called him, picked up the phone and called him. I thought, well, maybe he'll say no. But of course he didn't. He's such a wonderful guy, and he was so generous. And so we set it up, and the 3 of us, the Ohio guy and he, and we met. And as soon as we got there, of course, he's just talking, and I'm thinking, oh, no. We start the meeting, and he's totally different. He's a member of the group. Whatever that social anxiety was, it went away. And he was wonderful in the group. He made great comments. You know, everybody got a chance to talk. It was just a great group. He knew perfect study group etiquette. It just wasn't an issue whatsoever. Meeting ended. He was back to himself, but we could say goodbye and we could leave. Well, you know, I laugh about that. But then what I fast forward through the next year, what I found was that there were people who truly loved him, and some of them came back to group to be with him. And he came up with the most helpful recruiting idea that we had, which was simply to have a birthday party for him at a restaurant near his house. And he said, why don't we invite some of the people who used to be in study group with me? And I thought, well, okay, you know, I got hold of them, that'll be nice. And they came. They wouldn't come, and we'd invite them to study group. So for a year, they'd come every so often. We'd have somebody else's birthday, and you know, just to get them in there. And we'd say, well, come on back to group. It was the same drive, the same location. We could get them to come eat. You know, what is A.R.E? Always ready to eat, right? But at the same time, it worked on them, and they got back with us socially and got back with him, really. I know he attracted them back into the group. So some of the people who had been in group before, who lived way on the other part of town, came to group, and suddenly people started to kind of trickle back in. During that time, too, this terrible recruiter person here kept trying to do inquiry sessions. I had a wonderful dream group idea that we'd have a dream session and bring all these people in, and we brought in extra chairs, got it all set up, sent out invitations, you know, really a big thing. And it came 7 o'clock or whatever time it was supposed to start, and guess how many people showed up?
Oh, no.
0. So it was Diane. I invited her to come because she's good with dreams, and so we sat and talked among ourselves to finish the issue, and I thought, well, what is this about? You know, I'm working so hard with this. Why isn't it clicking? Why isn't something happening? Well, then something really odd happened. About 2 weeks later, I got a call from a woman who used to be in a study group in the 80s. She wasn't on my list. She didn't get invited to the dream group. And she said, you know, she said, I used to be in A.R.E. I really loved it. I went on to some other things. And she said, just a few months ago, I had this urge to become an A.R.E. member again. And so she had signed up, gotten her membership, gotten a Venture Inward. And in the Venture Inward was my name connected to a retreat that we were still having near Nashville, which is about 3 hours away from Memphis. And she thought, well, I'll call this woman, this Lora Little, and see if they have any study groups going on. And because she wanted to start a group in her home, and she had a couple of people who were interested. And so she called me, and I'm like, manna from heaven. And but I had nothing to do with it as far as, you know, having contacted her, having recruited her, or did I? And that's what this quote's all about. And there were others too. In fact, a couple of them are here. There's a woman who was looking for a group for her husband, and she called me out of the blue. She wasn't on our list either. And next thing you know, both of them are coming to the group. And there was another 3 ladies from a little town up north of Memphis who came just from nowhere. People who weren't on the lists, had nothing to do with my recruiting, my great recruiting efforts. But this quote from Cayce says, study then to show thyself approved each day. Do what thou knowest to do to be aright. Thy worry, thy anxiety will produce disorder, will only produce disorder in thine own mind. For the application in self, the try, the effort, the energy expended in the proper direction. All those inquiry sessions I did where the person never came back. You know, the dream group where we got all cranked up and nothing happened. All that was energy that I was putting, an intention that I was putting out there. I was feeding the good wolf. That's all that's required of me. That's all I needed to do. And God gives the increase. So God, the universe, did the rest. And these people started coming out of the woodwork. And I can't tell you that I did it. But if the group hadn't been there, then they wouldn't have had a group to come to. So I had a part I had to play. All this work I was doing, I got real good at doing inquiry sessions, I can tell you. Got lots of practice. So there's a lot of good in just the intention. And that's what I believe works. That's what I believe has worked for us more than anything else. So from the things that I experienced when I came into the Cayce work, you notice that I encountered the Cayce material multiple times in multiple ways. I kept seeing his name in books, although I didn't have a book just about him. There was Cayce material from headquarters and that they were distributing. And now, of course, we have the wonderful website that people can be a part of or can check into Edgar Cayce. There were programs at headquarters and locally that I could contact and be a part of. There are speakers who promoted a search for God, and I think that's one of the most important things you can do to not only build a search for God, but also build your community. Not too long ago, we had a speaker come who was not real well versed in the Cayce material and had never been in a study group. And I asked her if she would promote the study groups for us. And she honestly said, I've not been in one. I really don't know what they are. I really can't do it. And you all will have to do it. So I got up and did my best little song and dance. And we always have a nice little sign-in sheet for people to fill out. And of course, how many people did I get on the list? 0. I'm telling you, I'm the world's worst recruiter. But God helps me anyway. God feels sorry for me, probably. Okay, so speakers promoting a search for God is really important. If you have a speaker come and you can get them to say that Search for God is a really good program, you'll get people to sign up on the list. Well, when Charles Thomas was there, I got a whole list full. When Kevin was there, I got a whole list full. When the speaker speaks, what they have to say is golden at the programs. The interactions with local volunteers were important. For me to see that they were genuine people, that they were the kind of people I wanted to hang out with, that was important. So you out in the field represent A.R.E to people. A lot of people will never get here to Virginia Beach, and the only thing they're going to see is of course, they can see the website, but to see a real human being who's involved with this work is really impressive. And it kind of puts pressure on you when you bring somebody into a study group because you want to be on your best behavior. But I think that there is something different about people who are in search for God, that there's a quality that maybe you can't even see about yourself that others can see about you. So interaction with local volunteers, face-to-face interaction, regional and local newsletters. We had a newsletter even after the people who were doing all the work in our area left, and I was driving by myself, and we kept that little newsletter going, and now it's a much bigger thing. In the inquiry sessions, we always talked about it being guilt-free. But what I would suggest that you do is think back about your own time getting connected to the Cayce work and how you got into study group, and look at that to see what ideas you can get for recruiting. What brought you into the work, and what kinds of things were important to you. Okay, so we're going to go a little bit further. So here I am. Well, I want to show you too. And LeVan, I've stolen the infinity sign from you.
I stole it too from somewhere.
I've been pleased to get to work with LeVan on a project recently, and she showed me a PowerPoint that she had done that described how the headquarters and the field activities work with each other, and she called it an infinity. It's the infinity sign. It's a constant flow of information, of energy back and forth, and you certainly saw that in my experience coming into the work. I did a lot at headquarters, but eventually the field was important too. Getting that mimeograph newsletter after I just read There's a River totally freaked me out. It was just such a synchronicity. I knew that this was something important in my life. And if those field volunteers weren't out there putting it out, I wouldn't have gotten it. Even if I didn't go and join them, I at least got that synchronicity. All right, but then you see there's some other things there, the unseen forces. And the unseen forces I count on because my abilities are not there, but the unseen forces have helped me out more than you know, and there are people who are helping us on the other side. We believe that we've got some recently deceased folks from our area team and from our regional team who were very much love study groups and field work, and there are just things that happen sometimes that you just get the feeling that you're not alone, that people are helping. All right, so here I am then in 2002, and the auctioneers have just told me they're fixing to leave. You can tell where I'm from, fixing. And they're saying, will you be the coordinator for the retreat? well, I hadn't even been that active in the area team at that point. You know, I'd come to study group and I'd listen to Dave and Eileen talk about things they were doing to plan, and there wasn't much of an area team. A couple people would come and do things for the retreat, but they're just, and I was very guilty of it, not very active. And I thought, oh, I don't want to do all that work. You know, I know that's a lot of work. I've listened to Dave, and so I had that moment again, just like with study group. It was, well, and I heard this voice in my head say, are you going to be the one that stops this retreat that's been going on for 30 some odd years? You know, is there going to be in the history record, well, Lora Little didn't feel like doing it, so it went away. And I thought, nah, I can't do that. It's too good a program, and I've enjoyed it too much. So I dug in and did the retreat, and we worked on trying to build study groups in the meantime. Wasn't having a lot of luck myself, but then the unseen started bringing people into this group, and we grew. The fellow from Ohio, about the second year, he said he was visiting metaphysical groups in the area, and he said I'm trying to get people to come to study group. And I said, well, good, I'm glad you're doing that. And he said, but they're telling me there's nothing going on with A.R.E in Memphis. And I said, well, yeah, there is. We've got this study group. And he said, yeah, but you don't have any programs. I said, well, we have this retreat in Nashville and that I'm working so hard to get to do. He said, yeah, but that's 3 hours away. You don't have anything in Memphis. And I thought, oh, I see where you're going. You want us to do a program, and I've got too much to do. This is just more than I really want to do. And I just kind of dismissed it, but it kept eating at me, and I know that's an unseen force, because it kept coming back in my mind. I know he's right, because some people don't want to drive all that way to Nashville. How can we do this? So I called headquarters, and here's where, again, that infinity sign is working. And I asked if the headquarters field conference would possibly want to do a conference in Memphis, and they said yes. So we got a location. They helped me. They did a lot of the legwork, which helped tremendously, because I really couldn't take on, I had myself and a couple other people who were helping at that point. We didn't have our team really built back up. And it felt like too much for me to do by myself. But when the headquarters said, well, we'll do this part, we'll do the advertising, we'll collect the money, all of that, I thought, okay, I can handle it. And we can check people in, we can do the emceeing, we can do all the other parts of it. So we had a program. And dadgum if he wasn't right. We got people from the programs, and we got some of our best people. We got some people who have been our website, our webmaster and her husband. We got a lady who is now our area team coordinator, and she also started the Glad Helpers group in the Memphis area, and we got her through programs. And we got, in fact, enough people after we started those programs that we now have 6 groups in the greater Memphis area. I wish he hadn't been right, but he was right. So what you see is that all of these things work together. So we also had a very active region. Southeast region is extremely important to us. They helped us by, for example, giving working with Levan's office to get us membership lists and inquirers lists so that we could advertise our programs to people, and so we could tell people about study groups and get people in. The programs themselves brought people into study group. The study group people then became area team members. I can't tell you which thing, it's like a chicken and egg. You don't know which thing has to be there first. But I think the most important thing is study group, because those were the people who became our volunteers. At first, what we did when we just had one group is when we had business as a part of our study group, we talked about whatever we were doing for programs and projects. And so we told anybody that was sitting around the circle, well, you're now an area team member because you're here. And for example, the Martellos, after their first, I think they came in the summer, and then we had the fall retreat that fall. We deputized them so quickly that their first retreat, they were actually doing check-in at the desk, and somebody asked them where the restroom was. Since they'd never been in the building, they had no idea, so they had to call me, Lora, where do I direct them to you? I thought, yeah, we brought you in a little too quick. You don't even get to have one retreat without being a volunteer. So all those things work together, and they work synergistically so that if you get one thing going, the other things get going. And that's what we've seen over time. So from our programs, we get study group members. From study group members, we get area. We have got now an area team. We have 22 people on our area team. And of course, that also brings in memberships, and it also, the programs, brings in programs where you get even more people in. So the more volunteers you have, the more programs you can do and the more activities you can do. So I was area team coordinator for, I guess, 11 years, 12 years. And I was also the person looking at all these lists that came through. And I kept lists of all the people who came to our events. And I kept seeing on those lists people in this larger Mid-South area, which was 4 or 5 states. I kept seeing people who lived really near each other, big groups of people who probably had no idea about each other. People that ought to be in study groups, that there was enough of them to make study groups. And one of the areas I saw the most people was Middle Tennessee, near the Nashville area, which is about 3 hours away from Memphis. There was a greeter, a person who's responsible for study groups in that area, and he'd been ill for a couple of years. So finally, 2 years ago, I decided that I would ask him if I could work that list. We had reorganized our area team so that I could come out of the area team position, somebody else could take it, and a lot of the things that I was doing had been and are continuing to be divvied out to other people. Kind of jumping ahead here, but it really became obvious to me too that one of the things that had happened over the years in a lot of areas was that you had one person in charge until they died or till they retired and they left. And then when they left, you had somebody who was trying to pick up the pieces who'd never done the job before, and the succession piece was missing. And so because we had so many volunteers, I thought, well, now's the time to slice and dice and put some of this out there, have some depth in the bench. So you have people who know how to be team coordinator, people who know how to do registration, people who know how to run the different retreats and programs and different things that we do. And so that I could spin off and finally get to pay attention to all those study groups, potential study groups I could see on these lists. I mean, it just drove me crazy because I thought if I just had time, we could create some study groups. So before I could get that whole process finished, I think here's the universe again. I didn't think I said it out loud very often that I was going to be doing this study group work, but the next retreat I went to after we started to make the decision that I would be shifting out of this area team position, this lady called me and she wanted a group in Paris, Tennessee, and she was adamant. And I said, well, I might have time, such and such, and I'm not sure when I'll have time to do it. And she kept after me for a good 6 or 8 months that she wanted a study group. She would be a host, she had a place, and I knew there were people all around her. It's just kind of a small town kind of between Memphis and Nashville. And so finally, she had bothered me enough, even though I was really busy, I thought, well, I'll go ahead and do it. And so I went to Google Maps and I looked at the list and I found, I think, 47 people from her area who were close enough to her where she lived that they, if they wanted to, they could be members of this group. Now, all 47 didn't respond. About 12 or 13 of them responded to an email I sent and a snail mail if I didn't have their email. And I just said we were going to start a study group. And I guess it was about 8 of them, 8 or 9 responded, came to the first meeting. I went to their first 3 meetings, helped them get started because they hadn't been in a study group before. And then just left them on their own, gave them some materials, and you've got a listing of some of that material in your packet if you are interested in having copies of them. Anyway, that group flourished and gave me a whole lot of hope. I had another group in Bowling Green that I tried to help. It fell apart. And I knew that. I knew going in and starting a group that they weren't all going to make it. But the Paris group gave me great hope that there was a way to work with this. So then fast forward to last summer. I'm still really busy, got a lot going on. There was another lady who kept bugging me that she wanted a study group in Springfield, Tennessee. This is north of Nashville. And in fact, she was so adamant that she went to Hopkinsville to their group, which was probably like an hour away from her. She had to drive every day, or once a week, or every 2 weeks, I think you guys meant. But she was that hooked on wanting to be in a study group. I thought, she's going to be good. She's going to be a good host, and she was certainly willing to be a host. So last summer when I was here for Congress, I knew I had to follow up with her because when I think it was Jenny was doing her presentation, she was showing us the Facebook, ARE's Facebook program, and she was showing us some posts that people had done, and one of the posts was from her saying, "Can you get me a group in Robertson County in Tennessee?" And I'm going, "Oh no, that's her." She's not giving up. If I don't help her, she's going to find somebody to help her. So I called her when I got home, and we set it up then in July. And the funny thing was, there were people. I think they ended up with like 8 people. They had no idea there was anybody in their area that cared anything about Cayce other than them. In fact, none of them knew about each other, but I knew almost every one of them because they'd been coming to our fall retreat. There's programs again. You get programs going, and you've really planted seeds longer than you think you have. And so they'd been wanting study groups for a long time, but they didn't know each other. Except, the funny thing was, the host went to work the night before the day of the meeting. And there was a lady who was 2 desks down from her who looked at her name badge and kind of her eyes got real big, and she came over and whispered in her ear. She said, "I think I'm coming to a meeting at your house tonight." They weren't going to say anything to their other coworkers about this weird stuff they were into. And so when I came that night to be with the host said, "I think there's a lady from my job who's coming to the meeting." I said, "Well, don't worry, she's in this too. It'll be okay. She'll, confidentiality is one of our things. You don't talk about who's in your group, and when I understand in a smaller town, that's a real issue." So they were just amazed at each other. And then when they did the meet and greet, and they all got to talk to each other, and there were always lots of connections. It's amazing when you get to be a part of that people find out that they know this person and that person knows this person, and they were really connected at some level. They just hadn't come together. So that's our job as the field volunteers, is to help those people come together. That's what I truly believe. So that got me inspired, and I thought, okay, I'm gonna pull up my boots, and I know the Nashville area has some people who are interested because they keep signing up on our list, and I keep putting them off and telling them I'll get to them. So that was July that I started the Springfield group, and so I started talking to some people in Nashville, and we started a group in September, and I sent out an announcement to just 5 zip codes in Nashville. Nashville's a huge area, and they have many more zip codes than that. This is I think I was in the southwest area of Nashville. When I did my first zip code pull from the list of members, I came up with 186 people who had either been coming to our events. I recognized a whole lot of the names, or they were members, or they had been to the events elsewhere. 186. It really kind of scared me. I thought, oh no, what am I going to do? This is just a part of Nashville. Of course, some of them were bad addresses, old information, and they dropped off. But as it turned out, long story short, we started a group in September, and it reached the point where it was full, and I was still getting people saying I'd like a group. So then we found another host. We started another group, and still had people saying they wanted a group closer to their house. So we started a 3rd group, and then after I guess it was after Christmas, we started 2 more groups. One of the groups that I'd started in the fall had someone got married and moved, and the host's condo was sold, so we had to move to another location. So there were some shifts that we had to do. But anyway, right now they've got 4 groups in the Nashville area, 1 on the way. There's another one that I'm really behind getting them started. The Springfield group is in Middle Tennessee. I talked with a lady in Lebanon, Tennessee, which is just right outside to the west of Nashville, to see if she wanted to kind of learn to do what I was doing. And so she came and attended one of the groups. And So all seem to be going well, and I know we're not finished yet. There's a group. There's also a city south of in fact, there are probably a couple people here that are close to that city that want to have a study group as well. I mean, what I've learned from this is there are people out there who want study group. They've been wanting it for a long time. They've been coming to our events. They understand the Cayce material. They understand the value of study groups, but they could not put this together on their own. They needed somebody to for one thing, connect them to the other people because they don't have the list, and they shouldn't have the list because that's a confidential list. But the second thing is they oftentimes don't know how to start a study group, and there's just some basic things that you can do. So I usually try to go like 3 times. Sometimes I've had to go 4 mainly because once people get wind of it, more people come in and there's more orientations to do, so I end up having to stay a little bit longer. But I can tell you, if you have any interest in doing this at all, and I know some of you are starting study groups already, it's one of the most rewarding things I have ever done. When you get to hear how much people appreciate this work, and when they begin to see what's in those study group books. We use Mark Thurston's Experiments book and the Regular Search for God book, and they begin to interact with each other. They are so appreciative. It's what they've been wanting all along. They didn't quite know what it was, but when they see what it is, they're extremely happy. You see connections between people. You see, well, I've gotten feedback from them that these are their best friends. These are people who have become their support group, who they've interacted with at a much deeper level than they ever thought they would, and it's become a really important part of their lives. Now, some groups start out big, people drop out. You always have people who drop out, and then more come in later. You know, it's a constant thing back and forth. But the ones who have stuck with it have really, truly appreciated the opportunity, and they recognize that it is a really deep way to bring this work, to apply this work. For me, I get to sit back and watch all these connections. There was a town called Leapers Fork in near Nashville that we started a group. I'd never heard of it. You know, I'm not from that area, and there was a lady in the beginning who kept saying, she said, well, I don't really live in Franklin where my address is. She said, I live in Leapers Fork. And I kept thinking, well, okay, you know, I don't know where that is. But she said, it's way out in the country. And I said, okay. And she said, why don't you have a group out there? And I thought, well, I've never heard of it. I don't see any Leapers Forks on my list. But okay, I'll keep that in the back of my mind. So the first group that I had started in Nashville in September, a lady came from, and her address was Franklin. And she sat there for a minute and she listened to the orientation, and all of a sudden her eyes got bright. And she said, I have this huge house. And she said, I would love to be a host for a study group. She said, I have groups of different kinds that come to my home. She said, I would love to have host a group. She said, my son used to work here at A.R.E. And many years ago. They used to live in Virginia Beach, but she didn't get involved with A.R.E. at that time. And anyway, she went on and on. I could see she was really inspired. And I said, well, where do you live? And she said, Leapers Fork. I thought, well, there's twice. Okay, there's something going on here. University's doing something here. And sure enough, we were able to start a group in Leapers Fork, and there are quite a few people close to that area, and it's west of Nashville. And then when they got together, I must say, and there's Rosemary Batorsky in the audience there. It was a person from our area team who went with me and got to see this. But when they did the meet and greet, I've never seen so many people with connections. It was bizarre. People knew somebody's son, and the lady who was the host found in her drawer after about the third day a name and address of one of the ladies in the group, and because she'd been a masseuse or something, and she had been meaning to go and have a massage from this lady, and it was stuck down in her drawer. She'd forgotten all about it, and here it was. But just all kinds of interconnections, and so you realize that these people need to be together. They are part of a soul group, and so you get to be, as a field volunteer, a person who gets to watch that. It's like sort of maybe like being in obstetrics or something, where you get to see babies born and you recognize that something really major has happened. At least that's how it feels for me. It's a real privilege to get to be there at the beginning of a group. And it's hard to pull away, even though it's a long drive to get over there. it's really hard to leave after the third or fourth meeting because you begin to get bonded in with those people. But that's not the end of the story for Nashville. I had in the back of my mind, I thought, well, this is going so well. We've got 6 groups in Memphis, 22 people on an area team. They're probably going to have an area team one of these days. But let's give them a little time to do Search for God because, there's a lot of stuff you learn about cooperation and patience. And, as Herb Puryear used to say, really, Search for God is learning how to love. And, love God, love yourself, but love your neighbor. And you love the God in your neighbor, the soul in your neighbor. And that's a tough job to work toward. So study group helps us to do that. And so I was figuring that maybe next spring, I might spring it on them and say, hey, y'all want to start an area team. But oh no, the universe had other ideas. The first group we had started, they were already ready to start to have an event. They wanted to bring a speaker in, and they just love A.R.E and loved the Cayce material, and they wanted to bring someone in. And so I'm going, oh, wait a minute, let's do this as an area team. Let's be under the Southeast region with Martha. We got to, kind of get this a little bit organized. It's great. You all can do it. It's not a problem. We'll get you started. We'll show you how to be an area team. So on March the 16th, with Martha's help, we got materials together, and a couple of us from the area team, Pam Martello and Jamie Kaplan, our current area team coordinator in Memphis, drove to Nashville, and we had an all-day meeting to help them form an area team. And I figured when we started to explain what an area team was, that some of them would say, ooh, that sounds like some work, that's going to be some volunteer hours, maybe I don't want to do that. But 11 of them showed up for the meeting. We had a great time just getting to know each other and doing some exercises and talking about what area team was. And then toward the end of the afternoon, we asked people, well, how many of you think you might want to do this area team thing? And we said there was a lady who really wants to have an event, but do you think that you want to be an area team? All 11 hands went up. I wasn't expecting that. I thought maybe half of them would want to do it. So they blessed the lady who wanted to have the event. Somebody offered to be an interim area team coordinator till they could get themselves together in another meeting and really get themselves organized. And they're planning to meet again in July. They've got a date, and the interim person is pulling it together, and they had their event last Saturday. And it was wonderful. They did a great job, just really pulled it together. And brought in some people for another study group that I'm trying to start south of Nashville, and I got their names on the list. But the thing that really tickled me was one of those newly minted area team members found these 2 ladies. There were actually 4 young people who had come, and I'm not sure how they found out about it. I guess through the advertising, Facebook or something that Pam had helped put together. And she said to me, she said, there's some people here who really are looking for a group in Murfreesboro, and so you need to grab hold of them and get their information. And so I went and got the list and had them sign up. And I thanked her. I said, well, thank you for telling them about study group and helping me get this connected. And she looked at me and she said, well, I thought that's what being an area team member was for, This is my job now. And I thought, this is wonderful. This is wonderful. They're going to be okay. They're going to be a great team. But it takes, they could not have started an area team on their own. It takes those of us who've done it before, those of us who are out there in the field already doing this stuff, to sort of guide them along and help them to find their way, make their connections to the region, or whatever the structure is in your area, so that they know how things operate. But we had the meeting on Saturday. Somebody volunteered to be treasurer because we explained how the money flows, and that they needed a bank account and they needed to be under the nonprofit and all that. Well, Monday morning, the person who had agreed to be the treasurer had already called the regional treasurer and had set it up. And I was going to call him and warn him that he was going to get a call, but the guy got right on it. They got their A.R.E account, and I mean, they were off and running. And it's like, wow. What in the world? Of course, there's a lot of energy in Nashville right now. If you read much Fortune 500 and all, they've got a lot of people coming in to the area, but still. And we've been having these retreats in that area now for, 44 years, Jim? This is the 44th, I guess, this coming time. So there's been a lot of seeds planted over a lot of years. So those of you who've been having like Hopkinsville, hometown retreat, that have retreats in your areas and regular programs. You've been planting seeds. You've got some people who are ready for study group and who are ready from study group, then they can form an area team. And that can happen anywhere all over the country. I'm just shocked. This was not at all what I expected. And so the world's worst recruiter can do this. Any of you all can do it, and you can probably do it a whole lot better, and you've probably got better ideas than I do for how to make this happen. But I apparently have lots of friends up there in those unseen forces that I'm very thankful for, who keep me out of trouble. All right, so enough about me. Although this will be a little bit about me. All right, in your packet, you'll notice, well, first thing you'll notice, let's see, is on page 8. First thing you'll notice is that I'm an over-communicator. My team tells me my emails are way too long. And sometimes they tell me by not reading them fully. But I know they are. I don't read some of the long ones I get to. I'm trying to do better. But what I've included in your packet is, first of all, the quote that I mentioned about the try. As it says, this is on page 8. For the application itself, the try, the effort, the energy expended in the proper direction is all that's required of thee. That's all we have to do. I keep this under my computer so that I see it every day. Because there are times when I've worked real hard on something and it falls apart. I mean, that hadn't stopped happening. It still happens. I went to Hot Springs to start a group not too long ago, and the host called me a few days later. You know, I had to go spend the night at my niece's, and it was quite a thing to do it. But I'm happy to do it. Only 3 people showed up, and the host called me the next day to say that she just could not sit. She had a health problem, and she said, I just can't sit for 2 hours, so I can't have the group in my home. And she said it took me 24 hours to recover after having sat there for 2 hours. And, of course, I'm praying for her because that's a pretty good health problem that she has. And after all the effort that I had done, it was like, ah. But then the universe came back in again. The following Saturday was our Memphis one-day workshop. And guess who shows up? 4 people from Hot Springs. And they're real energetic. They're young. They would love to have a study group. They've been coming to our events for several years, and they just didn't answer that particular email about this group I had just started because they were, it was a morning group and they wanted an evening group, so they just hadn't responded. So, like I say, universe helps me out a whole lot. Okay, also in here is the first study group reading. If you look on page 9. And if you'll notice, down at the bottom under the first answer to the first question, that first study group was told that they could do greater things. That they were reminded that we have the capacity to do greater things than even Christ did. That we have that power within us. And then at the bottom it says, then as there cometh in the hearts and souls of each, so there will be given in the selfsame hour that as ye shall do. So if you do, you have to take steps and do something. Then you will be able to do more than you think. You take certain steps, then you allow the universe to fill in the rest. Okay, so this is the information, the try quote, the first study group reading, and I recommend that you look at it. Talks about cooperation, lots of things that are real important for all of our study groups. There's a great article by Edgar Cayce called The Real Work of A.R.E is Study Group. And one of the things he says in there that I think is important, some of you have been in study group a long time. And I think I heard somebody say today that they were now not doing a Search for God any longer. They were using some other book because they had just done Search for God so many times. It just really had gotten to be more than just kind of boring to them, I guess. Well, Hugh Lynn makes the suggestion that if your group has reached that point where they're getting kind of burnt out with a Search for God, he says, first of all, look and see ask yourself whether you're applying the information. You may know what's in those books, but have you really applied what's in those books? Of course, we all go, well. But then the second thing he says is create another group. Break out of the group you're in and go and create another group. And that's part of what we did in Memphis with our what I call our mother group. We had some people who had moved to a part of the city where I kept getting requests for group. They said they wouldn't drive to the middle of Memphis. They wanted to be way out in the suburbs. And so when they started, or when they had moved to that location, I asked them if they would leave our group and go start a group in that part, in their home. It was hard for them to leave. You get really attached to people, and it was hard for me to ask them if they would even consider it because I loved them dearly. But of course, now they're on the area team. They probably see me more than they want to because we all meet and have things that we do together in other ways. We're in Glad Helpers together and lots of other things. But it was hard for them to make that decision. But once they got out there, it also took a whole year. I bet I had 30 people over the previous couple of years tell me they wanted a group out there. But then when they moved out, the people didn't come. But they stuck with it. And they had, in fact, one of our members from the mother group who lived out that way went and met with them so that they would have 3 people. And it was almost a year before they got the other people in there. Well, thank God they held on because some of the people that came into that group are some of our most active members now. And so don't give up, even if it takes a year for people to find you wherever you are. But it was really important that we not be in one group, that all of the experienced people be all together in one group. We needed to spread out, and that's what Hugh Lynn says in this article. Okay, there's also a list of free Search for God information and resources, and I've got it, all of it that's listed there is digitally available. If you want me to send it to you, I can send it to you. It's no problem. Lots and lots of resources, including Search for God packets, what we give to new members, study group facilitator guides, all kinds of things. And then there's, at the end, the way I start a new study group, the steps for how I start a new study group. And there are lots of ways to do it. Margretha in Florida and Terry Quinn are just going great guns. They have hooked with Unity churches in Florida, and they're doing dream groups with the Unity churches, and have started several new groups and getting interest going down there. And there's lots of different ways to do this, but I'm giving you how I've been doing it, and it's worked pretty well for me in Tennessee. And now in Little Rock, we just started a group, I guess it was in May in Little Rock, and they're almost to capacity, I think. We say that you shouldn't have more than about 12 people on your list and 8 to 10 that attend regularly, and he's getting pretty close to that now, so they may have to split into more than one group. All right. So I'm going to finish with, and then if you have time, if you want to ask any questions, we can do that. This is a quote that some of you may be familiar with from the work readings. It's 254-50. And it was the speaker we had in Nashville Saturday before last read it. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And it's partly amazing because it's not just Cayce speaking. When you see the second paragraph, you'll see who is speaking in this particular reading. But he says, in these things then, let each be mindful of that place, that niche, that purport each is to fill. And fill that with all of the power, might, strength that lies within that body. And for you, it might not be starting study groups. For you, it might be to be the best refreshment person at the programs that you have in your area, or you might be the best check-in person, or you might be the person that parks the cars out in the parking lot. But you be the best of those people. Do it with all your might, all your strength. But you'll know what you're drawn to, what part of the work you're drawn to. And cooperate with other individuals working in their individual capacities, because we're all drawn to different things, that the whole purport may be as one. And that was a big thing we talked about with the area team in Nashville, that there needed to be a oneness. All those 6 study groups needed to get to know each other, and the members who had come get to where they could work with each other as one. So cooperate with other individuals working in their individual capacities that the whole purport may be as one, even as the Father and I are one in you. Uh-oh, who is this? I speak not of myself, but that ye may know the truth, even as delivered in the day when I walked among men and became known as the Son of Man and the Savior of a benighted race. These are the work readings, this work, what we're doing at A.R.E. Here, my brethren, ye are come again to fulfill in this place a glorious principle. This was 1929. A glorious article of work among the sons of man. Let each then, in that power that may be gained, in that association of the forces as manifested through each, become one in purpose. Didn't mean to hit that. As I was typing it in, I was crying. It hit me so strongly. I thought this is, and the reason I'm pretty much doing 24/7 here with A.R.E. In my family questions, what are you doing all this work for? There's no question to me, this is one of the most important works in the earth right now. And just what I see, just in this one little piece of it with the study groups, watching people's reactions, seeing them make changes in their lives, my own study groups, the things I've seen happen with people. A story recently, we had someone die suddenly of a massive heart attack who was a significant other of a member of one of the groups I'm in. They had been together for 9 years, a very close relationship. They both had marriages before and really weren't sure they were going to get married again, but it was, they were certainly married in spirit. It was a terrible shock for her. This particular person happened to also have been married to one of our longtime members in one of our other groups, and it had not been a happy parting. There were 2 children involved, and now this person who was in my study group had met him later on. She was not involved in the ending of the marriage in any way. There had been another marriage in between, and this was a later relationship. But the one in my study group was telling us the other night in study group, we were listening for whatever she needed to say. We were trying to be her support for the grief that she was going through. And one of the things that impacted me the most was that she said how surprised she was that the mother of the 2 children, who was our study group member, how well they treated her. She had no legal rights. She's not the next of kin. They could have just pushed her out to the side. They did not. They treated her with great dignity, with great love. And there had not been a close relationship, particularly up to that point. And I thought to myself, this is study group. This is the study group work that the ex-wife has done for probably 30 years, that she has raised the situation up, raised her own children to do the right thing in the right situation. And our member in our group was just amazed that there could be people like that. She was expecting there just to be just a real total mess like you see in most other situations. And that comes from the kind of work that you can do in Search for God. And I know that it did, because I know a lot more of the background of the situation. And I was so proud to know that both of these people are in study group, because also the lady who was the significant other was also open to accepting the love, even though she had some fears and paranoia about what might be going to happen. When she got the positives, she accepted it. And things have just gone extremely well. They're all at his house, cleaning his house, doing things together very intimately to get things ready for the funeral, and in a terrible situation. And yet they rose to such a high level that it just makes me proud. I hope if I get another 25 years in, I'll be that good. So that's the power of this work, and that's what you guys are doing out in the field. That's why what you're doing is so important. That's why what's happening here is so important. It all works together in Levan's infinity sign, that that energy flows back and forth to the field and back to headquarters, and it's really all one energy, and it's one purpose, and it's one work. And we have here, as they mentioned in my introduction, 20 people are with me who are field volunteers. I think pretty much everybody's a field volunteer. We have, let's see, I think 17 of us are from Tennessee and are from our area team and study groups. And then we have a board member and his wife who are also active in the North Carolina area, and a lady from Kentucky as well. And we've come together. We're living in houses together. Some people are roommates with people they've never met before, and people gel and they come together and it works. It's amazing, and it's a lot of fun. And it's how we got our Glad Helper group, which I didn't mention. The first year we came and had a beach house. There was one lady who couldn't come to the beach house, but she had a friend. She stayed with the friend. The friend couldn't bring her over here but one day. And the one day she brought her over was to see the Glad Helpers. And she sat through a Glad Helpers laying on of hands, and it impacted her so greatly that she came back so excited from just that one workshop, being here in Virginia Beach. And she said, "Can we start a Glad Helpers group in Memphis?" And I said, "Would you? This would be the most wonderful thing in the world." And she did, and she has. And I think there's, 19 people who are prayers on it, and I think we're up to 12 people who actually do the laying on of hands in the group, and they meet twice a month, and they're all study group members. They're required to be study group members before they can be in Glad Helpers. And it's strengthened our whole process because they're area team members too. It's just deepened the whole thing. So we get both things. So we thank headquarters for just that one meeting sparking somebody's enthusiasm that greatly that she would go to all the trouble she had to help us get our Glad Helper group started. So bring people to Congress next year. If you have people in your area, you never know how they'll be influenced by just being here in the presence of all of this energy, because we've certainly seen some good things from that. All right, so we've got time for questions. All right, Darlene.
Hi, Laura, can I just make a point of clarification?
Yeah.
You referenced that you had heard someone say that they weren't doing the Search for God books anymore.
Hey, Darlene.
We need you on the.
Oh, yeah, we need a microphone. Thank you.
Just for clarification, I think I'm the one that said that.
Oh, okay.
But our group, we've been together 47 years, and the reason we're together is because we have always kept with the Search for God books. Now, we've had supplemental material every once in a while, but we always go back to that. And what we're doing right now, we had just finished books 1 and 2 for how many years we have done that, and decided to do work from Kevin's contemporary Cayce.
Yeah, that's right.
And because each of the chapters they're so interesting, and each group leader each week gets to choose that subject. But we will never give up the Search for God books. I will tell you, I really feel after 47 years that that's why our group has stayed together, because we stayed with those books.
Okay.
Thanks.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. That's what I believe too. Yes.
Have you found the best way to go through the books?
Wait a minute.
Oh, sorry.
Yep, we'll wait for the microphone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
You know, Susie and I were in a group, well, Susie a lot longer, and myself, and then it disbanded, and we're going to start another one. What is the way you've seen the most productive to do? We would sometimes just do 2 pages or a quarter of a chapter, or do you go through the whole chapter? I mean, what have you seen the most productive way to do and then we would do Mark Thurston's book and have an assignment for each one, but sometimes we might only get through 2 books, and it seemed like it took a long time to get through chapters.
Okay. So some of the people who know me know the answer I'm going to give you. Each group has to decide their own pace is part of the answer. Some groups like to read the entire chapter first, even just everybody reads it on their own, and then they start the actual discussion of the group of the chapter. But I tell people when I do orientation that my very first group, I was in for 12 years before they retired and left. When we started, they were in book 3, what they call book 3, and they did that for like 9 months, almost a year, and finished it up. And then they started book 1 in my second year, so that was 11 years. At the end of the 11 years, we were in the second half of book 2. That's as far as I had gotten. So that might have been another reason why I wanted to stay in study group, because I wanted to see how the book ended, And so people are saying, well, how could you stand to go at such a snail's pace? Well, we had some people in the group who were really good at taking each paragraph and breaking it down and looking at the layers of meaning. We had a fella in the group who could ask some of the deepest questions. In fact, we spent 2 or 3 meetings on the affirmation of one chapter one time. I don't remember which affirmation it was. I mean, I wouldn't have known a question to ask, but as soon as he asked it, it was like, yeah, that what? And then everybody had their thoughts about it, and then he'd go and he'd ask another deep question about it. And he wasn't teaching, he really wanted to know, well, why does this mean such and such? And here's what I think about it. What do y'all think it means? And before you know it, the reading time was up. Was I bored? Never. I felt like I could barely catch up with how fast they went. Then when I got into groups later, the next group, when it was the 3 of us, they were used to going a little faster. So they wanted to go from experiment to experiment in Mark's book. So they would try to read to the next experiment. But sometimes he goes several pages before you get to another experiment. So we would just keep the same experiment for several weeks, and which was usually good because sometimes we hadn't done it, or sometimes we had the opportunity and we'd blown it, and it was nice to get a chance to try it again. So it's really up to the group what pace. I personally like a slower pace. I get nervous when we think we have to read a whole section, because sometimes, in the readings it tells us that once we know something, we're responsible for something. We're responsible for trying to apply it. So, as Eileen Auxure, who was our first study group host, used to say, what's the hurry? Because you're going to be responsible for what you actually understand from the material. So it's a long-term process. After 25 years, I do not consider myself an expert on the material. I'm an expert on processes, and not an expert, but I can tell you things about how to do a group, but not the material itself. I'm still learning every day. And we have a member in our group who has been in study group for 40 years. She still has her original book. She made notes. She was the person apparently who would let everybody know where we ended last time, so she would have the date in there, and every now and then she'd come to one and it would say 1974, and she'd look, she says, I don't remember that. She said, or I remember it, but boy, it didn't mean that to me then, however many years ago. Now that I read it, oh my gosh, I have a whole new understanding of it. So you change as the process goes on, and this material is so deep, it has so many levels that you can do it for 47 years, right? And keep on going. Not that there's not other good information to look at, and contemporary Cayce is a great way to stay with the material, but also get another take on it. And if you've got newer people who aren't good with the language or have trouble with the study group, then that's a way to take a break and look at some other, maybe get them a little bit more information, in my opinion. But each group has to decide what they're going to do. I'm a hardcore search for God because I want to get down in there and understand that stuff. And also I've seen people who've been in this work a long time who have been affected by the work. I see the growth. I see them go through some hardships in their lives and be able to do some really amazing things. Our first host, Eileen Auxure, some of you know, has Alzheimer's. She knew she was going to have Alzheimer's. Every person in her family had it. She wrote an article. There was an article written about her in Venture Inward, where she talked about how she had used the Radiac and the wet cell to help keep it away, and it did. She was 10 years later than the other members of her family, but there were like 7 children or so, and both parents got it, and then all the children ahead of her, and she knew it was coming. She got her Methodist minister younger brother to use the radioactive wet cell, and he's still doing well. But she had a problem at one point where she had some physical issues, had to go in the hospital, couldn't continue on the wet cell, so immediately slid down once she went off of that. She came back to Montgomery Bell, and we had her on to do a mini workshop about the wet cell, and didn't realize how far she had gone down. In fact, Martha came running and said, things aren't going well in here, and I didn't realize what had happened. So, everything came out okay, but then through that next year, she got back on her wet cell, and the next summer, I was in a music workshop with her, and she was supposed to do a talk, and I thought, oh no, they don't know, and this could really go badly. And so I just kind of hung close to her, and to make sure, and she had her notes and all of that. She was perfect. I kept thinking she'd get lost on campus or something. She was back. She was back, and that was the wet cell back again. But then she had one more episode of some really serious physical problems where she had to get off of it for too long, and she couldn't remember what it was when they tried to come back, and so they never could get her back on it again. But she's back in our study group. Her husband brings her. They moved back to Memphis. And what's so inspiring to us is that this work is so deep within her that she can't express it in words, but she'll make statements that are right on the mark. And there's enough words there that you know what she's trying to say. Like, it's the awareness, which was one of the things she used to say a lot. Or she'll pat you on the arm and say, you're doing good, you're going to be okay. She's loving and hugging, and it is, all of that's great. And then there have been several times when I'm sitting next to her, and she knows the Lord's Prayer, knows the 23rd Psalm, and understands what we're doing and participates in each part of it, just can't articulate. And then one day she looked over at me and she said, I really know this stuff. And she said, I really need to be here. I really know this stuff. And now you knew what she meant. And she knew somewhere deep in her soul where she was. So we do the meditation, and it's one of those long, like, opportunity chapters where it's, we're all supposed to have them memorized, but some of them are so long, I never got them memorized. And so I'm reading the book, leading the meditation, reading the affirmation, and I look over, and she's reciting it right along with me. She's still got it memorized, and it's still there. So it's, some of the other members are here. You just feel something. You feel that spiritual is still in her. And her daughter tells us that when she gets confused and things, kind of get difficult for her, she's at a nursing home now, her daughter uses the Cayce material to pull her back. And so she sometimes goes around and teaches other people about, Cayce material. She's being of service to other people, but she can get her righted if she'll bring up something up from the Cayce material. So it's still there. And so I think, okay, if this happens to me, I hope I've got the stuff, and it's deep inside of me that I can feel the joy that we feel from her. It's really an inspiration to have her in the group. We don't know how much longer it'll be, but she certainly knows she's where she needs to be. So there's things like that happen that are amazing.
You fascinated me, Laura, when you said that you started when your group was in book 3 when you first started.
Yeah.
I love that because I have felt like if we've gotten too far along, even toward the end of book 1, then it's just too hard for the people to join, that they'll be cheated. I feel like they'll be cheated. But now I can see, has that worked for other people besides you? I can see if it would work for you.
We bring people in wherever we are in our groups in Memphis.
Because that makes it a lot easier for bringing people in.
Yeah.
I love that. Thank you.
Yeah. And there are some things that they've missed from the earlier times, and if it's appropriate, we'll say something. But otherwise, we just tell them, stick with it. This is a long-term thing. You're not going to get it in a week. It's not a 6-week program. It's not a 1-year program. It's a long-term, and you're going to cycle back through and get the rest of this. And, you know, but I was worried when I went in that I thought, oh, you know, I won't know anything and I won't be able to contribute anything because this is too far advanced for me. And it wasn't. You know, the way they ran the group was everybody's comments were just as important as everybody else's. And I can't tell you I understood the book as well as I might now. I need to go back to it now. I haven't been back through it again since then. But I didn't.
Anybody by letting them start it?
No, not that I'm aware of. Mm-mm. Yeah, and that makes it. You're right. It makes it a lot easier. It's a lot more practical because you know you don't want to have to start all over again each time. The rest of your group's going to get bored if you have to do that over and over again.
Laura, can
Other
you
question?
talk a little bit about it sort of piggybacks on what Margrethe just said of you do actually a couple of different contacts with a new inquirer before they're introduced to the group. So it's not that they're just sent to an address and
Right.
expected to. So could you talk a little bit about how you guys handle that?
Okay. Well, there's a couple of things that happen. If it's a group that I'm starting, you know, I'll send out an initial email or snail mail if I don't have their email, telling them what this is, and then I usually give them her per year's covenant article, and I have and it's on your list there, what's called a new member orientation sheet that gives them sort of the ground rules of what a study group's all about, what the do's and don'ts are and kind of what the format is, and so they'll have some idea of what this is. And sometimes they don't write back, and I think, well, good, then I didn't waste their time, they didn't waste mine. But most of the time, they're okay with that, and they're intrigued. And so, again, if it's a new group, then I'll take their name, and that they are interested, and then we try to find a host from among them because we don't have a group at that point. And then when I find somebody who's willing to be a host, and I have several ways to sell that, and there are letters in there that do that. And one of them is from something Eileen Auxer used to say, is that there's something about the spiritual energy that permeates a place where you've had a study group for a long period of time. She said people used to gravitate to the room and they didn't know why. They just thought this was such a lovely room. And she would just kind of chuckle because she knew really what it was they were being attracted to, even if they didn't know. So also you don't have to drive to the meeting. There are a couple of really positive things about being a host. Right, Jim and Mary Carmen? Yeah. So if you got to get up early in the morning, you don't have to drive home, and you can set the time. So at that point, once we have the host, then I'll give the names of the people who said they were interested in the group, once we figure out a time, to the host. And before that, we don't. It's kept confidential, I think, if that's what you're getting at. The list that we have of A.R.E members and inquirers is, as Martha has told us, is a sacred covenant that we protect their privacy. I always appreciated so much when I was a member at A.R.E that I didn't get a lot of other stuff from other organizations because the mailing list was given out to other groups. I respected that, appreciated it, that we were protected in that way, and so I continue. I don't have any problem continuing that with the list that we have. So we don't give the names until the person has indicated an interest in study group. We don't just give, somebody says, I want to be a host. Well, here's some people who are in your area, and you do it from there. You want to keep those names confidential. If it's somebody in Memphis who's interested, sometimes they don't come through me. Sometimes they have been recruited by somebody in one of the other groups, and they go straight to the host of that group. But if they found my name somewhere, like on the website, then they'll contact me and I'll tell them where the groups are. I'll send out the covenant and the ground rules for what the group is and tell them some things about the group, and then kind of have a little question and answer back and forth, and then they tell me where they would think they want to go in the city, which one would be most convenient for them, and then I connect them to a host. And that host then does an orientation with them ahead of time. Yeah, we do at least 30 to 60-minute orientation where they, we in the first group that we had, you know, of course we were taking anybody who wanted to come. One of the stories I was telling you this morning, again, here's the universe. There was a lady who came in when we had two groups, and she had a lot of physical problems and some mental problems. But I had known her many years before in a professional capacity, and knew her when everything was good in her life. And but these people did not. In this particular group, knew that she was a little difficult to deal with, and so they didn't want her in their group. She wasn't difficult, she was just not always quite there at that time. But we had faith in her, so we told her she could come into our group, and eventually over time her health issues began to resolve, and I think there was some help from some of the people in the group as well as prayer that a lot of things straightened out for her. And do you know, she became our best recruiter. She brought in more people to our programs and to our study groups than anybody. It was like a gift. You don't know when those angels are coming in. We had another fellow that was just a difficult fellow. We think that he might have had Asperger's syndrome. He's probably somewhere on that continuum. And he one of the things that I got tickled about was that he could not stay silent during the meditation. He would make bodily noises. He would yawn. Just a lot of things happened. And at first I thought, well, I'm going to have to quietly talk to him. Have you ever meditated before? I could tell him about this is the quiet period. I thought it'd just be a little bit of instruction and everything would be okay. He said, oh yeah, I took TM. He said, I know how to meditate. So I thought, okay. So I mentioned about the quiet, but it really didn't do anything, didn't do much. But what I learned how to do was to tune that out, or just to laugh about it, to be joyful about it, and bring that joy into my meditation, and not be so rigid that I had to have the silence every minute. So that was a good thing. And then we got to know him, and he really had struggled in his life. Well, we had a program. Lynn Sparrow came and did a program on karma. We didn't have very many people attend, and so we were a little unhappy that we didn't have the numbers, but it changed his life. He came back from that meeting, he said, I get it now. He said, I see why my life is the way it is. And we're all so happy for him. I mean, because he was not a person to say anything positive unless it was really, really positive. And you could just see all over him that he had made this major change. And 2 weeks later, we got word that he had passed away. And he'd been found in his house. He lived alone. And so, of course, we felt really bad for him, and we figured he didn't have anybody. As far as we knew, he didn't have any friends or other people in his life, so we made sure to go to his funeral. And boy, were we surprised. This fellow got all over town, and he had people all over town who knew him as the character we knew. Each one of us knew something different about him, and loved him, and cared about him, and had ministered to him. And then we got to thinking afterwards, this person is not what he appears to be. This person is an opportunity that came to all these different groups, and he certainly was an opportunity for us, an angel in disguise probably. So he wasn't the one coming in to learn. He was the one teaching us, and we learned a really important lesson from it. It affected all of us. I don't know why I got into that, but there's so much that happens. So anyway, we do an orientation, because in our very first group, we had people who would just walk in. Our great recruiter lady that I was telling you about would just tell them, oh, come on, they start at such and such time. And so we'd be ready to get into things, and here come a new person. And it would be kind of disruptive to kind of have to explain. I mean, I'm a person, I don't like to have somebody come in and them not feel comfortable and welcomed. So I didn't want them to sit there while we go about being our little close-knit group. You want to include them in it. But it became kind of cumbersome to constantly have to explain, well, now we're going to do this and now we're going to do that. So we decided it was a lot better to do an orientation before they came. So we do 30 minutes to an hour so they know what meditation's about, and understand the structure of the meeting, and then we don't have to do all that explaining, and they do feel a lot more comfortable when they start. So, long answer to a short question. Okay. Any other questions? There's one back here who's got the mic.
Yeah. Yes, a couple of comments. One thing you were mentioning earlier about like people feeling like kind of like hush hush about, oh, I'm involved with A.R.E or Edgar Cayce, things like that. And I find, at least for myself, I'm actually pretty open about that with people. And it's surprising how many people that I happen to mention where I don't think there know anything about him or anything that actually do know a bit about him and stuff. And also, when I first got involved with the study group, it was when I was 19, about 10 years ago. Just little joke there. But the members of the study group seemed to be, I don't know whether it was demographics of where I was or exactly what, but seemed to be a lot younger based than they are now, as far as that goes. And you were talking about recruitment and things like that, and I was thinking of how to reach out to people that are, under 50 as far as that goes. Like maybe, I know earlier they were talking about like using the web and Facebook and things like that, but I was just thinking about maybe being a little more proactive with those types of things may end up generating more younger people to get involved with it.
Yeah, and that's a good thing. And I think all the connections with Facebook and Instagram, a whole bunch of new things they're doing with headquarters workshop. We have a website in our area team that our webmaster is over there, and she has us hooked into Facebook so that we have people liking us and connecting to us with that. And then of course A.R.E has Facebook as well. But Peter Woodbury gave a good talk last year and said something that really hit home with me, and there he is back there talking about it. That really and truly the work that you do in study group is something that's for the second half of life. Now, some of us started earlier than that. I started in study group, I was 37. I came here the first time when I was 30. Kevin Tedeschi started when he was, 5 years old in A.R.E, just about. From what he was saying, I think 15, really young. That's unusual. That's unusual. And I know when I first started coming here at age 30, that there were more people older than me. I was usually the youngest person in the circles when we'd have sharing groups and all, and they'd say, "Oh, what do you do, sweet thing?" You could tell that I was an anomaly in the group. Now that doesn't happen so often. I don't know why. But I'm not saying don't reach out to them. We do have someone who's actually 30 now, but she started, I think, when she was 25 in the group. And it was because her son had an illness that she wanted to research the Cayce readings, came and found that, got really deeply into them. They were very helpful to her. And she came to one of our programs and decided to join study group. But that's unusual. But even with that, it's hard for her to she's a study group host even, but it's hard for her to stick with it because of work and her child, things that she has to do with her child. She's doing really well considering. But when in that first half of life, you have things, you've got children to raise or a job or a career to get together. You're really learning, putting yourself together. Carl Jung used to say you're actually creating your ego, which is your adaptive self in the earth plane. And then after that, you can begin to go into the unconscious and really become self-aware of who you are. But you've got to have good ego strength before that. You've got to have some stability before you get to that point. So really, study group is more for people later, but not necessarily programs, though. Programs and other things I think are still a good way to bring people in. And apparently a lot of people are accessing the website who are younger and doing the things that are of interest to them. And the hope is that we can get them then involved deeper into some of these other things when they get to the right age for it. I think as far as volunteers go, right now we're mostly the boomers generation that has taken over from the World War II generation. I don't know what they call all the generations. And then it's going to be up to the boomers to get the Gen X up and running. And we've got some Gen X in our group, but not enough. We got to keep bringing them in. The millennials need some more time to get their family life, their education, the rest of their things together before they're going to really be able to probably be volunteers down the line, although there'll be some exceptions. There'll be those Kevin Tedeschis that Darlene found for the work. So keep looking for them. Don't keep them away if they're out there. But by and large, we probably are going to be more gray-headed, and that's the point Peter made. That back when he first started, they were saying the same thing. We got to get young people in, and of course he was one of the young people then. I think this will always be a work for people in the second half of life, probably about the 40s and up, because that's where you're really ready to start to look at yourself. Because when that mirror goes up, it can be pretty painful sometimes, so you got to be ready for it. And luckily, this work does step by step, line upon. We have a one group that harsh back and keep us from. The back has the microphone.
Young adultish. So
Age group are you?
1 to 7. So around that. Say up to still young, depending on your perspective.
So do you meet at the same time, or is it?
We're not 12, like it varies from meeting to meeting, but it's like I enjoy it a lot, and a lot of people get a lot out of it.
And it's live. You're all there at the same time.
We're all there, and usually like we'll choose a topic. So once we did on ideals, so we did the Kevin Tereshi ideal like workbook, and that was really good. We did the dream incubation. So it really varies. Whatever the group wants to do, that's what we do. And I strongly encourage anybody. Anybody's welcome.
So if people know folks in that 21 to 37, is that kind of your ideal age group?
Absolutely, yeah.
How would they find this group?
They can talk to Karen Bolt, or they can talk to me. Probably Karen would be the best reference point.
We also have instructions for those of you over 37 who might be interested in setting up a Google chat. It is actually, I started with them when they first started. Back last Congress actually was when we first got started, and then John joined in. And it's actually really nice because you see the person, it's a split screen, so you see everybody. Of course, you can also hear things in the background. The first one that we did, my son was 3 at the time, and I told my husband, please be quiet. And of course, during meditation, my son comes with a duck call. So you do have to be aware of some of those things, but it is very much like being in a live person group. So for those of you who don't have maybe the physical, we can get you instructions on how to get.
Can you snail mail those instructions?
Sorry, I missed that one. What?
He wanted to know if you could snail mail the instructions.
Yes, I can.
There's always one in every group, you know.
There are a couple more things that I found really successful in recruiting. I think is praying. So in your study group, like when you get to the praying part, you pray for your future members.
Yes.
So you pray for future members.
We do that. We do that.
I've heard of a study group out of British Columbia, and what they did is they started putting like little cards in library books about their group. And they got a new recruit. He took a book from the library, and the card fell out, and he was like, oh, that's so meant to be. And so he joined the group after that.
Creating synchronicities, yeah. That's cool. So people still go to libraries and get books?
They do, in the Cayce books.
I'm encouraged, yeah. I'm encouraged to hear that. That's a great idea. That's a great idea. And putting...
on those cards.
What did you put on those cards? The question is.
Because they just put like the name of their Cayce organization that they have in British Columbia, but with a contact person, and so anybody who borrows that book from the library, they will find that card, and if they're interested, then they can contact them.
And so these are Cayce books that you're putting the card into. Okay.
Yeah.
So that way they've got a local contact rather than, because there's usually some A.R.E information in there, but that gives them a local person they can contact.
It gives them a local person in British Columbia to.
Yeah, great idea. I know some people who put venture inwards in their doctor's offices and different places where there are magazines, just laid around, and leaving things in places where people, just like in my story, it's sort of like it just kept coming up. This Edgar Cayce guy just kept coming up, and opportunities just came in front of me. So if we can put some of those opportunities out there for people, all the better. Yeah.
And lastly, also, I bought 10 copies of Sidney Kirkpatrick's book, An American Prophet, and I'll tend to lend them out, like just they're forced to give them back to me, and that really works too. So.
Okay, good idea. Sounds like a good idea, doesn't it, Sydney? I saw you smiling back there. Okay. I know you guys are full of great ideas, and in fact, one of the things that we'd like you to do, if you're at all interested, is put your name and address and contact information on a sheet that is by the water coolers in the very back, or on either side. Okay. We were calling it an A.R.E community building. Become an A.R.E community builder. It's information about how to become an A.R.E community builder. And really what we're going to try to do is have some of you that are doing this already, that we can share information back and forth with each other, because I certainly don't have all the answers. I'm just telling you my version of what's happened, and I can hear from things that you all are sharing that there's lots of other ways to do it, and it's always interesting to hear those. I know in our regional core team meeting, we've had several meetings where our study group members from all over the 10 states have shared different ideas that they've used to recruit and connect members, and they've been really helpful to me. I know one of them is Margretha has had people who are e-members of her groups. They cannot attend the group, but they're willing to send her their dreams.
We used to do that.
Okay, you're not doing it currently, because you do have to have a mentor to do that.
Once I started the web, then I stopped the other.
Oh, okay, when you started the step-by-step on the web. But it inspired us in Memphis to be sure after every meeting to send an email out to tell everybody what experiment we were working on, what had happened during the meeting, you know, if there were just little tidbits of business and maybe something really interesting insight that somebody had, so that people who couldn't be there would continue to feel connected to the group. You know, sometimes some people drop out because they just couldn't come several times in a row, especially people in that first year or so, and they think, oh, well, I've missed 3 meetings already. You know, whatever that force is that pulls you out of it, pulls you even further when you do that. But we found that the emails help keep them connected. And we've had people who've been gone for 6 months who come back and say, I was following the emails, I was doing the experiments that you were sending, and we thought we'd lost them forever, and then they eventually have come back.
Just to follow up on that.
We need the microphone. Somebody have the microphone? Yeah. And yeah, this will be the last one. We need to go here.
Where are you? Right here. Thank you.
Just to follow up on the email idea, we've been doing that for a long time in Birmingham. Study group is 27 years old, I think, but we keep names on there of people we think you're interested in who don't show up every week. There's about 8 of us, and we have about 15 on the list. So there was one of our members was injured seriously, and we sent out information about that. And the next thing we knew, we got a $50 check from Beijing, China, from a member who had been following. We had not heard one word from her. She had done every single exercise, been involved with us, and she was the first interest that was expressed in helping this member.
Oh my goodness! Wow.
She was in Beijing and was following our study group.
Oh my
And we hadn't heard
yeah.
from her, but she was paying attention.
So you never know what effect you're having. You may think that things are going out in the ozone, but they're not necessarily. There's a whole lot being done. All right. Well, thank you all for staying and being a part of this. And thank you for all that you do out in the field, because I know many of you are involved doing stuff 24/7 and probably will never know the full extent of what you've done for A.R.E out in the field. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Little. What an inspiration, huh?